Hello, I am the OBG. Welcome to the OBG Show this April the 16th, 2026. So I'm going to talk about the art of debate here. And I believe, and some of you may have witnessed it, and I think the very people that I'm talking about may not, but there's been a quiet shift that's taken place in how people argue. And I don't think it's for the better. Now, what passes for debate often feels like theatre nowadays. It's a massive show. People aren't trying to understand a position, or they're not even trying to test their own thinking. They're just trying to win. And I don't mean in any meaningful sense neither. Just small internal victories that they award themselves along the way during the discourse. And for them, a louder voice becomes a point scored. Catching a minor mistake becomes another. Something they'll just point out, you're wrong, you made a mistake. And agreement from a spectator, which I really dislike, when they turn to someone else. See, isn't it so? And it's like, you're arguing with me. Keep it on point. Even if it's based on poor reasoning, it gets treated like the confirmation of truth. And it's a kind of mental scoreboard, if you will, built on what could be called binary ego points. I made that one up. Now, in that, I mean everything's reduced to wins and losses, regardless of the substance. And this isn't how an argument is meant to function. If you go back to the liberal arts and the trivium, rhetoric was treated as a discipline. And that's something that, the ancients used. It had structure, rules, and it had a sense of responsibility. You weren't just expected to speak. You were expected to think clearly. And arguments were built on logic, credibility, and emotional awareness. But those elements had to be balanced. Misrepresenting an opponent, it wasn't clever, it was a failure. And winning without truth wasn't impressive. It was empty. And the aim was persuasion, grounded in reason, not domination through noise. Now, what we see is a breakdown of the standard. Debate has been flattened into performance. People interrupt rather than respond. They latch onto trivial errors instead of engaging in, the actual core idea of the argument. I mean, I learned to argue, to debate, arguing with people who think they can do so just because they can shout their point or throw in a few profound sounding phrases such as, oh, well, nothing really matters. That just gets boring after a while. I think they confuse confidence with correctness. And it's not that logical fallacies are new neither. They've always been around, but now they're used kind of more casually, almost instinctively, without any awareness that they undermine the argument itself. And the goal for them isn't to reach a better understanding, it's to avoid conceding ground. And education plays a role here, but not in the way that people often frame it. It's easy to dismiss poor argument as a domain of the uneducated, but that doesn't always hold up. I mean, you can find the same behaviour in people with degrees, credentials and professional status also, but the difference is presentation. Some people dress weak arguments in polished languages and others don't even bother. However, the underlying issue is the same, a lack of depth, a lack of discipline and the discipline in thinking. And there's always been a shift in how people acquire knowledge, and this has been, it's prevalent right now. Information's more accessible than ever. But access isn't the same as understanding. Watching a handful of YouTube videos or skimming a few articles can give someone an outline of a topic, but it rarely provides the depth needed to engage with it properly. Real learning takes time. It involves reading, questioning, being wrong, and refining your position. It requires sitting with ideas long enough to see where they hold and where they also fall over and where they fail. Without that process, what you get is surface-level familiarity, just enough to sound informed, not enough to withstand scrutiny. And this is where a phenomenon like the Dunning-Kruger effect comes into play, yes, and those argumental types, you're going to have to look that up. I'm not explaining everything today. And when people know a little, they often assume that they know a lot. It's related. Now, that confidence feeds directly into the kind of arguments being made. If you believe you understand something fully, then you're less likely to question yourself and more likely to dismiss others. And the result is a conversation where neither side is really engaging because both are too busy defending positions that they haven't properly examined. And the term ego debating captures this well. It's not about the subject at hand, it's about the person making the argument. Every exchange becomes a test of identity rather than a search for truth. And conceding a point feels like losing status, so it's avoided at all costs. Even obvious corrections are resisted, not because they're wrong, but because accepting them would feel like a defeat. And in that environment, progress is almost impossible, and it really does get me down. And the consequence is fatigue. Arguing becomes tiresome, not because disagreement is inherently difficult, but because the quality of the engagement is so low. You end up not dealing with opposing ideas, but continually, dealing with defensive postures. And there's no shared standard, no agreement on what counts as a good argument, and no incentive to improve. And without these things, the debate loses its purpose. I try to get my adversaries, if you will, to stick with the argument, or at least present one. And the key points of an argument are the claim, the main point or conclusion, reasons supporting evidence, and sometimes a counterclaim and a rebuttal. A well-structured argument also includes a clear introduction and conclusion. If rhetoric is to mean anything again, it has to be treated as a skill worth developing. And that means valuing clarity over volume, substance over style, and truth over point scoring. It means being willing to represent opposing views fairly, even, when you disagree with what the other person's saying. And it means accepting that being wrong isn't a loss. It's part of the process of getting closer to something accurate. Now, until that shift happens, most arguments remain, they're going to remain what they've become. It's not a meeting of minds, but a contest of egos, where the only real prize is the illusion of winning. And this is what I'm up against when arguing with people who are used to brute force and shouting. I'm not that guy. I've put the work in. I am the OBG.